Hello, my name is Drew, and I'm the Aspiring Master, and welcome to the Aspiring Master Presents. This is a show where we talk about the meanings, misunderstandings, and insights about the important words we use and misuse on a daily basis. Really understanding what we're truly meaning when we talk allows us to convey and explain ourselves better to others. This not only allows us clearer communication so we can get what we need quicker and with less stress, but also helps us understand ourselves in more depth than we thought possible. Today on our show, we have our special guest, Therese Wilson, who, like myself, is a practitioner, instructor, and advocate for personal growth and cooperative awareness. Together, our experience amounts to well over 50 years of personal growth study and experience, and we wish to share with you some of the insights and understandings that we've discovered along the way that we think can help make all our lives easier and less stressful through a better understanding of what we may be unconsciously saying. Today on the show, we're going to talk about fear.
So let's dive right in. So I'm going to go for the Merriam-Webster dictionary definition of fear first, and then we're going to just sort of talk down from there and discover what we need to discover around this wonderful word. So fear, an unpleasant, often strong emotion, often caused by anticipation or awareness of danger. So for me, that seems to be a pretty adequate definition of fear. What do you think?
Yeah, I think we're done.
Yeah, but that's it. That's it. There's no more show. We're not doing this anymore.
I'm so funny.
Thank you. Thank you for that definition. And we're finished. And that's a wrap. And hold on. And it's a wrap. Thank you.
I think it's adequate as well as far as it goes. But of course, why are we fearful? And can fear be more than just a sign of anticipated danger?
Right. Well, I mean, and again, something that we can look at is what is danger. I've actually broken this down. I was thinking about it the other day, and I've broken this down, and it's like, so fear is quite literally the body's response to what we perceive as danger. And the response is adrenaline gets pumped, a bunch of endorphins go into your system because adrenaline actually hurts you. So the endorphins go in to make you feel better about everything moving. And you have the fight, flight, or freeze.
Yeah, and that's the problem. We go into our reptilian response and maybe even our mammalian response, but we don't go into our rational response.
Right.
When it comes to fear, and that is false evidence appearing real. And it's the false evidence part of fear, I think, that is maybe part of the biggest discussion, because it's what we ascribe to something that creates the fear. And why do we do that?
Right. Well, I mean, I'm actually going to investigate fear a little bit more before we get into false evidence appearing real, because it is really, really important that we go there. And it's actually almost a long discussion in itself. So I don't want to hit there before I hit a couple of more points. The point that I'm making here is like, what are we afraid of? What are our what I would say base fears? And I came up with only two as our root fears. And it's the fear of death being the major one, and the fear of pain being kind of a secondary one. And the reason that I separate those two is because it for me, when I think about how my fear structure works, I go, what am I the most afraid of? It's like, initially my fear response is I'm afraid of dying in some form or another, right? So it's just like, I'm afraid that I'm going to die. The old hindbrain goes, oh my God, you're going to die. It's time to move forward and get this done, or freeze, or whatever it is, however I respond.
So the fear of being socially ostracized would be the fear of the social connection?
Yeah, well,
the death of the social connection, rather.
yeah, well, basically, the fear that you will be cut off, and you will be cut off from your resources. And if we follow that route down to the root of
Of
fear of death,
death.
right?
Yeah.
We can
Death.
say,
Well, yeah.
yeah,
Okay.
we can say that, yeah, exactly, that intrinsic connection, that need for connection that we have as people, is so strong that we would fear losing those connections for fear that we won't get sustained, with all the stuff that we need from that.
Whether physically or emotionally
Yeah.
or whatever. Okay.
Well, but the reason that I say pain too is because pain buys into this. When I look at my fears, I go, okay, fear of death being the root cause, right? Like, of our fear as just mammals, right? We are protecting ourselves from death, right? Now, pain comes before death, and I found that, me personally, one of my major fears is I'm not so much afraid
Afraid
of
of death,
death,
but a
right?
painful death.
but
Yes.
I'm more afraid of pain than I am of
Yeah,
death.
yeah. Well, and I get that. A lot of people will say, they choose not to do chemo or whatever because the quality of life, that have a short period of pain versus the prolonged period of pain. Just get it over with. Just let me die.
Right.
And of course, if we believe, and I do believe, that there is something more beyond death, that this is just a way station, so to speak, then I don't really have that same. I don't have a fear of death. I have a fear of dying, perhaps.
Well, so one of the things that I found is, if you have, like, rationally, absolutely, I think that rationally we can rationalize pretty much anything. We can say, if you believe in a higher power, or you believe in life after death, or you believe in nothing after death, or however that works, for an individual, that you can say, oh, well, I'm circumventing my fear of death. But remember that our mammalian brain does not identify that way. Like, our lower brain functions only identify fear, danger to person, meaning danger to person leading to death. And so, even though rationally in my mind I can say that I'm not afraid of death, that mammalian part of me is still there, right? That fear is still present in our lives. We just sort of are able to sort of short circuit it to a degree.
I get that. Yeah. Now, hopefully, we are not reptilian. We are not strictly mammalian. We have higher functions as humans than those two real categories. Of course, we are part of them, especially if we believe in the evolution, that we came ooze, and that we really are reptilian as well. But we have a higher functioning part of us that can supersede, and we don't consciously come in contact with that part often enough to override our fears. But it is a tool that's definitely there, and that's called our higher functioning part of our vagus nerve, and just our higher ability to rationalize and know and differentiate.
Right. Well, and I agree with you, because there's certainly fears that I like, what I would consider irrational fears, that I've overcome in my lifetime. A fear of heights, which is a sort of a base fear, really. It's like, I'll fall
that's
and die.
not necessarily an irrational fear.
Right. Like, exactly. But it can be irrational if that fear of heights is fear of falling from a 6-foot height as opposed to falling from 1,000-foot height, right? So when I take a look at, I've been able to overcome fears in my life, and to switch my thinking around the fear. And it's not necessarily that the fear itself stops. It's that I recognize it as it comes up, and I reprioritize it so that it's not taking over my system, right?
Yeah. I can't say I have a fear of public speaking, such as we're doing now. but it's easy, with doing it with someone that I know. It's more difficult for me when, even in a limited situation like this, where I think I'm going to be judged for what I say.
Mhm.
And that comes to the death of my ego, I guess. I'm worried about getting cut down, and my ego gets wounded or dead.
Mhm. Well, and this actually ties into something that I understand about how we rationalize as people, and and when I say I understand, in my experience of myself and in talking to other people around it as well, when I look at uh, fear itself, it is our ability to rationalize things with our higher brain function that really sets us apart and buys into what we're going to talk about next, which is false evidence appearing real, right?
Yeah, because that rationalization is a double-edged freaking sword.
Yeah,
Sometimes it raises us up, and sometimes it cuts us down. and, and it's the false rationalization.
so when we talk about, I mean, I at one point in my life, I had heard false evidence appearing real, and I thought I kind of understood what it was about. But when I got into really taking a look at what that meant in my life, what is false evidence appearing real, that wonderful acronym that we use for fear, and why is it so prevalent? To me, it's that our brains can cause our body through a thinking process to produce chemicals that simulate the emotions that we feel often. Fear being the biggest one. And so when we think, or when we imagine, because we're capable of imagining a future as opposed to just living in the present.
We're
Uh,
writing our story of the
yeah,
future. Yeah.
yeah, we're in our minds, and because of that, we tend to make it, when we make up a future that looks bad or something is scary. Again, scary is subjective to how a person thinks about any given situation, but we have a scary situation. It's sort of like if you said, oh, what you're thinking about, what if a murderer comes through my bedroom door, just as you're trying to go to sleep, and you say, what if a murder comes through my bedroom door? And all of a sudden you get that punch of adrenaline and all of the stuff that goes along with a murderer actually walking through your door, that we make that up in our minds, and our body just correspondingly throws that stuff out there that uh, gets the adrenaline going,
Yeah.
right?
See, the problem is fear has a very real place in our lives. It is there to send the signal of danger. It's there to protect us. Uh, and so we when we get even the slightest little inkling of discomfort, I believe our body translates it into the full-blown word fear, instead of just noticing that something might be off or uncomfortable. And then we create this false evidence based on past data that was real.
Right.
Someone was there in someone's house trying to murder them,
Right.
and, and there's a creak in the night, and it's a murderer at our door. We start immediately to write stories, large and small, around the little bit of a feeling that was that was real, that our past data tries to write a story and find a reason for it and a rationalization of it, and it comes up with, I'm gonna get murdered.
Right.
Because it has that data back there. It doesn't have the data that there's a bush scraping against the window
The
pane.
window, right.
You
Well,
know.
and here we are with that false evidence, obviously, and when it appears real, is is like you said, it's like all of a sudden it appears real, but then there's the other part of this where is you're not even, there's not even the brush is not even scraping against the window. You are anticipating brush scraping against the window, right?
Yeah.
So all of a sudden you've just made up something out of whole cloth.
We've created these little loops
Mhm.
in our lives. Yeah.
So it's, to me, I just go, this is false evidence appearing real. It's that our minds are so strong and so powerful at this point that we are actually making up stuff that scares us.
Well, the best lies are based on just a grain of truth.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And fear knows which little grain of truth to grab us.
Well, I mean, it's no different than the experience that we're experiencing now in with the coronavirus going on right now, that our brains are going nuts. It depends on who you are and how you think, but like a lot of people that I run into are they're either completely denying it or very, very scared. I find those two spectrums all the time because nobody knows what to expect and where we're going. And we keep making up these stories that we play in our heads and react. And unfortunately, our body reacts in response to them like they're real.
So we are self-fulfilling prophecies for our own physical beings, at least.
Yeah. So it's sort of the nature of the beast. And if I go back to the reasons that we experience fear, so the two reasons that I came up with for myself, and add any if you think that there is some, is the fear of death and the fear of pain.
Wait, I think fear is there. I think there's a third reason now that I think about it. Fear is there to inform us of something. Inform us.
Inform us of something. Okay.
Yeah. Well, inform us
Yeah.
of possibly impending danger. It's not necessarily something that is, but that could be given the data that it has.
Mm-hmm. I agree. I now the thing is, in my two base definitions, like my two roots of fear. So I go, if I'm afraid of pain and I'm afraid of death, then above that, so I wouldn't root that, what you were saying, down as a root, but also just sort of a one step up. Yes, fear does do that.
Well, not a root, a purpose of. How about that? There's a purpose for fear.
Yeah, no, definitely.
Yeah, it's not all bad to be afraid.
Mm-hmm.
Fear and pain, actually, for me, are there to make us take a look.
Mm-hmm.
But if I have pain, okay, let's say someone stabbed me in the arm. Well, now I need to do something about it.
Mm-hmm.
Or if I just have muscle aches, okay, what did I do? What do I need to adjust? And this is very, very basic. What do I need to adjust for my pain? Fear, if I'm going into a situation, okay, what danger may be in this dark room, and I have to now begin my higher intellectual abilities and start evaluating, because the fear has notified me that they're in there. So I think there's a purpose for fear and the pain that you reference that we are afraid of.
Well, no, I absolutely agree. I think that that fear can be used in a number of ways, and eventually, for me, fear is just a flag, right?
Yeah.
Fear is just something that says, "Hey, something's up," right? And so then my conscious brain goes into that process that you're talking about. Is like,
and of course, it's going into that process. You put it, that is the higher function of fear, but most often we go into the story of it, and we stay in the story instead of the rationalization of it.
I think that the fear of pain for me is probably more prevalent because I don't like uncomfortable, right? But here's the thing. It's like when we were talking earlier about social connection, and because it is one of our basic needs, which is social connection, then food, water, and shelter, because social connection we need in order as babies, because we need to connect with somebody to provide us those wonderful things.
Yeah, yeah.
So when we're talking about social connection and the fear, comes into that fear of public speaking that people so often talk about being one of their major fears. And it was, so what are we afraid of in that? We're afraid of being ostracized on a huge level. Like, because if you're in front of an audience of 100 people, that's being ostracized by 100 people, or being ostracized by one person can bring up that fear.
Yeah, because at root of that, if you are up there standing alone in front of a group, or even one-on-one with another person, it's nothing but you and what you have said that someone has rejected.
Yeah.
And being rejected on the premise of who we think we are,
Mm-hmm.
it cuts to the quick.
Well,
and it makes us fearful of losing other people's respect and all the other things, you know.
Well, I think that for when I go inside and I internally look, it's like, okay, so if I was in that position, what would be my thought process around that? Because when we look at it, it's like I'm in front of a bunch of people, one, that don't know me, and two, that, you know, are probably not going to be in my life really, realistically, rationally. But when I'm up there and I'm afraid of being ostracized on that level by that many people telling me that I am not good enough, right? Comes back to my insecurities, absolutely. But what is my thought process really behind that subconscious thought process? I just go, if these people reject me, that means that everybody may reject me and I won't get any needs met. If I go down to a primal level, which will cause, for me, pain, like that's really painful to say that I'm being disconnected. And so there's that pain that, if we go back to our base functioning,
and
could lead to death,
if you're
right?
going to go even further than that, if we get rejected too much, then I might be in pain as I starve to death.
Yeah, exactly.
or as a saber-toothed tiger
Right.
attacks me, you know.
Right.
Yes.
No, I totally get that. So in regards to how we talk about and understand fear, I mean, I think that our thought process, our conscious thought process, really can help us through a lot of this, because we can rationalize a lot of the fear that's going on if we understand it as something that we can utilize in our lives as a flag to say, hey, pay attention here.
Yeah, to pay attention and use the tools that we have through our rational mind, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Simple things like take a deep breath,
Mm-hmm.
change your sponsoring thought, do the reset that we program that Nana and Joe do, that I talked about in the love segment. There are things that we can do to mitigate, and most of them quite simple,
Mm-hmm.
except for changing our sponsoring thought. But if we get into the habit of noticing and using the tools, the more frequently we do it, the more able we will be to do it successfully on shorter notice and shorter period of time in overcoming. Otherwise, we get out there, we sweat profusely, and we plow on through.
Yeah. What I want to do is I want to make it very clear that what we're doing around the show is we're trying to get people to consciously understand, one, what they're doing and how they're using this. So when and what we get confused with, and a lot of people would, because I know that this is kind of like phobophobic, but because we're so scared to admit that we're afraid, we really do use a lot of other things to say, well, well, I wasn't scared. It just made me nervous, right?
No, or we rationalize our fears and say, "Oh, I didn't really want to do that anyway," and we give up.
Mm-hmm. Well,
Or it's not that important, or it's more important to me that that person like me than that I do this, and we rationalize. Yeah.
Well, and I think that we really do mislabel fear a lot in our lives because we don't want to be seen as weak. Because again, fear, being afraid, and this is especially for guys, but I'm sure that it's similar for women in some ways, but for guys, it's weakness to be afraid of anything. And so what we do is we take that fear and we turn it into what one of our next segments is going to be, anger, which comes from this root that we have. And I think that we forget that a lot of the things that we do say, like I was nervous, if we say I was angry, we're really saying we were afraid.
That fear, I think, is rooted in our mammalian response in some ways, especially with regards to that weakness you're talking about, because a number of years ago, there was a friend, a neighbor of ours, brought this cute little kitten, I'm going to say not quite full grown, but and it was friendly, and it was full of flies, and just very friendly. And they brought it to the vet, and it turned out this poor thing was so close to death. But the vet explained that animals, when they get injured in the wild, because the weak are the ones that get preyed upon, they bury the pain.
Mm-hmm.
They act normal as they can in order to try and appear not weak. And I think that's part of what we're doing. I think you've hit something very squarely on the head. Our fear moves us into an area where we bury it and do whatever we can to appear not weak now, including avoiding really, as opposed to just going ahead and doing whatever that thing is that makes us fearful.
Right. Well, I mean, the reason that this, I think, is so important to start identifying in our lives as fear, and understanding that it is more of a flag than it is something that we need to react to as much. When we can rationalize and understand and know that we're being fearful in any given situation, I think that we can actually see what's making us afraid, and take action in our lives to either circumvent that, like to avoid it. Like fear's a really good detection, like you said earlier, of where we need to, what we need to be aware of.
Something we need to look at. Yeah.
And that we can utilize it to do that. But we are so into mislabeling those fears and trying to not be weak, as you're talking about, that we totally miss the opportunity to grow. Now, you and I have been in personal growth for a long, long time. And so we've really taken a look at our own fears and how we react to them. And we're really, really conscious of what we're thinking. Right?
I just let myself around once in a while.
Yeah, exactly. But we're really, really conscious and focused on what we're thinking, right?
False evidence appearing real, yes. But it's also, if we take that same feeling and change it to feeling excited and ready.
Feeling excited and ready, got it.
Yeah, because the feelings, the endorphins and everything else you're talking about that are attendant with fear are the exact same ones that are attendant with excitement. And if we can take that and change it over to feeling excited and ready, then we can take those same things and have them propel us forward instead of hold us back.
Well, and definitely there's those techniques to be able to move through it, and figuring out how to do that. I'm just trying to make people aware of what it is that we do, right? And how that affects our lives in general.
Oh,
So
okay.
when
Yeah.
when when I when I look at fear as the flag that I'm talking about, it also makes me really question my internal working, and what it is that I'm afraid of. And when we mislabel fear, when we say fear is like, I'm not afraid, I'm just upset, or I'm just right. And when we deny what it is that we really are, it's like when I'm uncomfortable, I go, well, there's some fear involved in that.
Mhm.
There's I'm afraid that this is going to happen. Or if you're in a relationship with somebody else, and you're in a love relationship with somebody else, there is always a taste of fear that you're going to lose that on an imagined level,
Yeah. Yeah.
that you could lose that. And so there's that fear dictates a lot of our actions. Like, if you know that the wife is going to be angry that you bought a CD player or something, right? Like, you can tell I'm an antiquated here. So the wife will be ticked off at you if you went out to eat and you didn't get her anything, right? There's fear that plays a part in, my decision making of, should I go out and buy that McDonald's burger without bringing one home
Mhm.
for my wife. And then what entails from that is, okay, well, I'm afraid that she's going to be angry with me, right? So
Sometimes, yeah.
I'm gonna buy that burger with cash, so she didn't know I had it, and I'm not gonna mention it. But you can see how
But
fear
but the little
dictates.
gyrations, yeah, the little gyrations that
Yeah,
that fear creates in us, yeah.
but it's something that I find that most people don't even understand, that decision making process in their lives, that fear is such a big part of it. And what I want to do is I want to demystify fear and say, to feel fear is not weakness, because from understanding the root of fear and how it affects us in such a huge way, because this emotion, this feeling, this word that we're talking about really affects everything that we do and why we do it. you know
Yeah,
uh,
yeah, I get that because all of the primal emotions are operating all the time and making judgment calls in our subconscious that we pull up and use or don't use or misuse in our everyday lives. Yeah.
well, and with with consciousness, and like I said, you and I have been studying ourselves for quite a long period of time, right? We don't look at the world as the world to us, but us to the world. And that's a different perspective. So we go
Yeah.
inside and we take a look and we find all of the things that we can know about ourselves. And we go, oh, that's why I do that. I do that because I'm afraid. And
Yeah.
this fear is based on, I don't want to be painful. I don't want to be ostracized from society. However that is, it's an analytical process that most people don't go through. But it's once we discover that we're motivated by those things, then we can change them. Like rationally, we can just go, oh, okay, that's not a rational thing for me to be fearing at this
Yeah,
moment.
yeah, and let's not be flippant, and I was a little bit flip earlier. It is a simple process, but it's not always simple to implement in our lives. But uh,
Well, I mean, it's based
if
on.
we're committed to the habit of noticing,
Mhm.
then it is simpler, if you will.
Well, consciousness to me is the start. It's the start of that process. When you start being conscious of
awareness of it,
awareness, consciousness to me, awareness of
Okay.
all of the things that you're thinking and doing, and the reasons why you're thinking and doing those things. Like, I mean, when you say that I've got a habit, I love grabbing my cigarette, and I love putting it up to my face, and I love lighting that stuff, and I love inhaling that stuff into my lungs. It sounds like that process sounds really bad, but having been a smoker, I understand how good that can feel, right?
Yeah, me too,
and
unfortunately.
yeah, how good that can feel, and how much attachment that I put in the joy in my life and pretend that it was from that. So I can see how those habits we rationalize, and they feel good, and it's wonderful. But
Yeah.
when you start to really break them down and understand the reasons, like, why did I start smoking? I can tell you why I started smoking. I started smoking when I was 14 years old, when people were accusing me of smoking when I wasn't smoking. And my whole attitude was, screw you guys, I'm just going to start smoking. Then you guys won't tease me about it.
Yeah, mine was nearly as lame as yours.
Oh, lame is it?
I was sitting in a small kitchen every weekend playing games, backgammon and other games with 3 other people, and they all 3 smoked, and I was smoking anyway. It was my rationalization. So on weekends I started smoking with them, and I was a natural. I didn't choke or anything, and I inhaled. 20 years later, I finally quit.
Yeah, it took me 20 years, actually, pretty much the same. I was
I was
24.
20, and I was 28 years old when I started.
Yeah, I was 14.
I do not disagree with you about awareness and consciousness is the key in understanding any of our emotions, and implementing, if you will, the proper way to use those emotions. But the thought of being aware of yourself all the time just seems like a horrible burden to people casually listening to someone say, well, you just need to be aware. And I would say, for me personally, it hasn't been a burden. It's been pretty easy most of the time, because the more, if I become aware of something and I can understand something, then I can move away from that what you resist persist mode, and I can stop butting my head against that thing, and I can live life with more ease because I took a look at it.
Yeah. Well,
So
I mean,
it's not like I'm going through life all the time going, I'm aware of everything. Oh my God, I'm a horrible person. It's not that way at all.
right. Well, and I agree that when we're talking about consciousness and awareness, and the way that I put it is, when you become aware of something, right? It's sort of like, if you've been doing something a certain way your whole life, and somebody came up to you, case in point, actually, I got a story. When I first got into DJing, I'm a computer guy, and I'm a DJ that DJs music. So when I first got into DJing, I was a karaoke host, and I was hosting karaoke for a guy here in Victoria, and he said, "Hey, I've got a DJ gig. Did you want to do a DJ gig?" And I said, "Oh, it shouldn't be hard." So he showed me how to do the switch the CDs back and forth, and do the whole DJ thing. And it's cool. So I did a wedding, and I did it really well. I got a $50 tip, which at the time that I started was actually a pretty substantial tip. But I hated switching the CDs back and forth, and hunkering over my table, and it really hurt my back, because I have lower back issues. So I'm like, okay, give me all your CDs. I ripped them, and I put them on a computer, and I found a program that was able to mix these things and do all of this stuff. So I progressed in like one gig. I progressed DJing from that platform to another platform that I was familiar with. I went back and I talked to this guy, And I said, hey, you're going to want to do this. This is so much simpler. You don't have to worry about queuing up the next CD to the right song. You don't have to worry about any of this stuff like that takes up 3/4 of our time as DJs. You don't have to worry about that. And he said, oh, no. I'm so used to doing the CD thing. It's the way that I've always done it. Now, when somebody tells you something like we're doing now, it's really hard to imagine it physically for yourself, how that can save time. So it was about a year later, he came into one of the gigs that I was doing for him. And I was out in the audience, I was talking to some people, and the song that was currently playing was about to switch. And he was freaking out because
you weren't up at this DJ.
because I wasn't up at the console doing anything. And the song was about to switch, and he's like looking back and forth between me and the thing going, should I go up and help him and cue the next song? When it automatically started to play and go into the next song, and people were on the dance floor still dancing, and I was still over there talking to somebody, and he was like blown away.
Now I get it, he said.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it's and now I get it. And he got onto the computer immediately after that, saved him, 50% of his time. And all of a sudden he is in a really, really good space, and it made his life move faster. And that's what we're talking about right now. The awareness of these words that we use: fear, love, anger, courage, they're all of the stuff that we're going to tackle through this, and that awareness that comes with it. I cannot tell you, and just like you were saying, you cannot explain to somebody adequately enough to say that it's not something that you're going to be, oh, I'm going to be aware of everything and thinking of everything, and I have to think of everything all the time, and it's just going to take up all my time. And because we see that and we say that as we're moving in, like the old DJ did. He said, no, I'm so used to this. This is the way that it should be. I'm fine. It's fast. It's great for me. And somebody comes along and says, well, hey, this awareness thing, because you and I have been doing it for a long period of time, of course, it's now such a habit that we don't even think about it anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The analogy that I like to use is things like fear and guilt are putting your feet in cement, facing backwards.
Mm-hmm.
The only view you have is your fear and your guilt and your past. So you are missing out on what's in front of you.
Mm-hmm.
So if you can get yourself to move past those things, then the world opens up.
Well, and I agree.
Your
And
options are there.
This show in what it was designed to do is be able to show you how to be more aware of what you're doing now, so that you have those options, right? You didn't even know you had those options before, right? Right. All of a sudden you watch the show, and maybe you only get one thing out of it. Maybe you only get this one little tidbit that fits into your life right now that goes click, and you have that revelation in your life that says, oh, I've been doing this for that. And then once you understand that you have that option, then you go, oh, how do I change this? And then you go and look up whoever's book that talks about changing fear into courage, or, like whatever that is. You can take this information that you get from this show and start to move forward in those areas. And because without the awareness, you didn't even know it existed. And the awareness that I'm trying to get people to have in their lives is, I'm not telling you how to do it. I'm not telling you where to go with it, but to be aware of it gives you options that you didn't have before.
Yeah. To notice when you're fearful, what?
Yeah.
What is happening? What have you, fear is one of those things that, yes, fear is there. I truly believe to make you notice danger and to be aware of it and to avoid it. But it's also again, a double-edged sword, because it just sits you down and says stop, and you don't ask the questions. If you're afraid of something and can't answer the questions about, not why am I afraid, but how is this fear helping me or harming me?
Mm-hmm.
What is this is this fear helping me? Well, of course sometimes it's going to do that, but most of the time our fear is harming ourselves. It's not harming anyone else, it's harming ourselves. We don't take the opportunities, we don't do things, we don't go places, we so many things, that our lives, because of fear, if it is making your life smaller, it needs to be looked at.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to tell anyone how to do anything about it, but you have to notice, is this fear expanding your life by keeping you out of danger, or is it making your life smaller and harming yourself,
And-
even to the point of harming your body? What does your body feel like when it's fearful?
Mm-hmm.
It is not helping your body.
Well, and two, on that note, if you don't even know that you're in fear, right? Like, I mean, that's the thing, is like, wait a minute, I'm feeling anxious, but remember that that's a form of fear. I always said to people, and yeah, I don't want to talk out of turn, but somebody that I used to know,
That's
was
a song.
somebody that I used to know, that I used to say, I said, listen, I said, like, what are you afraid of? And they said, I'm not afraid. And they said, well, you're angry, right? And I, well, yeah. I said, so what are you afraid of? Why do you need to utilize your anger in order to be able, because you're afraid that you're not going to get something that you want? I'm not sure, right? And they go, right?
I've been that person on
Yeah.
occasion.
So when I ask the question, I just go, yeah, well, it's really good to know that this is a root to a lot of things. So understanding that you are afraid gives you those options, and understanding that you may be mistaken your anger, which is a reaction from fear, that we use, and males use it all the time to cover up being afraid, because they don't want to look like wimps. And the big one in male society, if you understand guys, is pussy. I hear that one all the time. It's
and we're going to go there. I dare a man to have a baby like that pussy does.
absolutely. Well, I mean, and again, and I'm not differentiating, but that's how men talk to each other, and how we end up hiding it.
You equate strength to physical strength versus, I get that.
Yeah, well, I mean, when we get into courage, and when we get into anger, and those words, as we go along, because there's that we revert back to the root of a lot of those words, which are fear and love, and all of the stuff that we're talking about now. But when we get into those words, we get into some of those wonderful nuances that we're just sort of hinting at right now, which is it's really fun to be in this specifically. I think that we're sort of tapped out on where we can go with the fear thing, until we want to share with people how to get past it.
Well,
right?
what I do want to say is we're going kind of on a little bit more esoteric bent, but that feeling of fear, I learned something. Our physicalness, our biology creates that fear in a number of ways. And I was feeling anxious and fearful, and I was going, I don't get it. Now I am fairly empathic, and I have been known to really get other people's feelings. I had a girlfriend who was overdosing, committing suicide, and I got her physical feelings of drugginess and despair and everything, and I figured out who it was, and so I was getting some of those same feelings of fear and anxiety, and I wasn't fearful or anxious that I knew of. And it was a physical thing. What your heart does when it's
Mhm.
fearful, my heart was doing because I'm older now. And I did have to take a beta blocker to stop the upper chamber of my heart from doing whatever it was doing.
Mhm.
And that stopped that feeling. So your body also tells you when there's something wrong. So be aware of all of the possibilities of what fear is, how the feelings present.
Well,
It
it's
could
that again,
wow,
you are saying like again, that's that awareness that we're talking about.
aware.
That's that our consciousness of, wait a minute, I'm feeling that. Now, is this a physical thing, or is this something I'm
Yeah,
thinking
what
about, or
else
is
is
yeah.
yeah. And I had to rule out things that other people don't necessarily have to rule out,
Mhm.
And in that process, I finally came to, okay, I guess I better go see a cardiologist, and I did.
Mhm.
But you're right, awareness and self-awareness, even if it's just awareness of your physicality,
Well,
your norm. Yeah.
and you bringing that up, also something that we missed in the conversation was that the feeling of fear, right, is it's a bunch of chemicals that happens in the body when we're reacting to generally a stimulus, right?
Mhm.
But that the body itself can produce those same chemicals and produce that
Independently
same
of fear.
feeling
Yeah.
um, through no fault of your own, but through a chemical imbalance, or it's because it does
or
happen.
or, or watching too much TV
Oh
with
yeah.
stressful stuff, or
Well, I mean, it can trigger the imaginary fears, absolutely.
well, no,
um,
no, no, no. When you well, it's scientifically proven
mhm.
when we watch a movie where all these things are happening, our body response
Yes,
is
like,
the same as if it was really happening.
yeah, no, no,
So
no, no. I
we can
agree. That's
stress
what I was exactly saying. I was just
okay,
saying it in a different way. Yeah,
okay, we can stress our bodies without without knowing it.
yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, what do you think people like scary movies? Is that it pumps the adrenaline? The adrenaline
Yeah,
throws the endorphins out there,
yeah,
because adrenaline is a painful thing for your body. So your body, pumps dopamine and
yeah.
all of the other stuff that
I
makes
would.
you feel cool.
I've never been one who was particularly fearful of scary movies, and my
Mhm.
husband was always one who was, and I will never forget the first time that a scary movie actually got to me. We were sitting in the movie watching the first Alien.
Oh, right, right. Yeah,
And when that darn thing
popped out.
jumped
Yeah.
out, and I sat there, and my husband looked over at me and said, "Got you too, didn't it?" And I said, "Yeah, we can leave now if you want." And he went, "Oh no." He said, "Oh no, something finally got you. You are sitting through this thing."
That's awesome. So I think that bottom line, I mean, the awareness that we have around what we're doing, being aware as, and we're talking about the body chemical stuff. And I mean, we've got a really high anxiety society. When people have social anxiety is what that fear that they feel of going out in public. And that can be certainly a chemical thing in the body, but it also could be a mind thing,
I
where
think
they imagine themselves being rejected as soon as they walk out, right?
yeah, what's going on with COVID right now, with the fear surrounding it, I think in large part, of course, there are real concerns, about the economy, about
Hmm.
catching it and stuff, but um, and I think some of the news media is aware of it. It's the disconnect from other people right now that is creating the fear and anxiety. We can't have our usual hugs. We can't have our usual whatevers. We're feeling disconnected from the larger society, and of course that begs the discussion of how how necessary is actual physical connection with one another
Hmm.
versus virtual connection. And why is our connection to ourselves not enough?
Hmm. Well, I mean, and like you said, that really does buy into a lot of our fears of disconnection and fears of if we'll ever be connected again. Um, I it there the COVID-19 and all of the fear that surrounds it is certainly a topic that we can sit and talk for hours on. Holy cow! I think that like, I mean, to go back to where we were talking before about being able to do something about stuff. If you understand that you're feeling fear in any given situation, if I'm saying that I'm feeling anxious, if I'm feeling, upset, generally it's a fear-based thing. So to understand that we're using other words to describe being afraid, and fear being the feeling that we're feeling around it. And it could be very mild. It could be very overblown, depending on what we're talking about. But when you have the awareness that this is really what's going on, and I want to state, like, absolutely and unequivocally, that we are uh, courageous for admitting that we're afraid and not pussies, um, or wimps or weak to do that. It's actually, when we get into the word courage, this is the basis for courage. Courage is being able to admit and be who you are and be afraid and all of those things, because until we acknowledge that fear is what we're feeling, um, uh, or love is what we're feeling, or how we're feeling love and how we're defining fear, as soon as we get to that point, then we have something that we can do past that. Now we've got an option to say, how can I fix this? But until you even know you have that kind of problem, you don't even know that it exists, that there's any kind of
Yeah,
thing that you can do,
yeah.
right?
And stop passing judgment on ourselves.
Hmm.
The you perceive yourself as weak. That's a judgment of less than. And yeah, until we can acknowledge that any emotion we have, whether we eventually move past it or not, um, if it's ours, it just is. It's not right or wrong. It just is. And if it's working in our lives, then we give it a cursory look and move on. But if it's not working in our lives, stop burying it, stop judging it as wrong, just look at it and do something about it.
That was another episode of The Aspiring Master. I want to thank Therese Wilson for coming on the show and talking about this wonderful word fear with me. I look forward to seeing you next time.